Hi, my name is Paul Birchak and welcome to the Art Studio Adventures. Join me and go where creativity rules the universe. Thank you, and I'm going to show you a little demonstration here on how I created our little chipmunk friend called Chippy. This is a pastel on sanded pastel paper. Here in the beginning of my pastel, what I do is I try to find my size and shape relationships. So a good place to start, I think, with especially animals, you're doing a full body, is to look at the overall size of the animal and how you're placing it on the paper. So this is kind of a full figure portrait study of Chippy, little chipmunk, and what I usually do is I start off with the head. Find the placement I want on the paper so I get the body and the head in about the right place. And then I'm going to use that head as a ruler for measuring other elements of the body, and also using it just throughout the picture, gauging how big the head is in relationship to the entire negative space, the body, the foreground and ground. I think all these pieces fit together so you visually have I guess a pleasant visual placement of everything, so people like it when they first look at it. Kind of catches their eye, and so that's my goal in the beginning of Pastel. So as Chippy evolved, I went a little farther in just thinking about colors, thinking about how strong my background might be and what colors I might be using for background. So I introduced a small amount of green, thinking, okay, I want to see how I can make my colors warmer. You can see I used a mirror there. I do use a mirror a lot in just about all my work, even still life, especially portrait of people, but in animals as well, really making that visual adjustment by looking at it in the mirror. It's amazing how you'll see whether or not an eye is too high or a nose is too off to the left or right, or a variety of all kinds of elements start to come into it. It's something about how the brain works, I think. Some people just, I guess, might naturally have a knack to really see things and not have to make adjustments with the mirror, but I know a lot of other artists who are extremely accomplished portrait artists who basically really rely on that mirror. I recently was reading about a famous portrait artist that here was a living artist who uses the mirror constantly in their studio, right behind where they set up their easel, and then they have the model across from them, and they're able to turn around and look in that mirror. I'll have the same thing in my studio, a mirror behind me, but often I just have a hand mirror, which is really handy. And I use that even if I go to draw or sketch at the Metropolitan Museum of Fine Art. I'm just doing a study someplace, or the Brooklyn Museum of Art. I keep that little hand mirror so when I'm sketching I can look at it, because in the process a lot of times you're just right on top of it. You're thinking, oh, this is working just great, but or you put it in the mirror and you find it's, you gotta kind of tweak things around and move it around. So the process of using the mirror, now thinking about colors and sizes and the shapes of the arms and the overall figure of Chippy is my goal at this point. I usually take quite a bit of time laying out this roadmap. I find that it's well worth it. If you have the placement of your composition well in the format of this rectangle, then your results will come about more easy. If you take that time to make that good roadmap of whatever your figure is, your still life, any elements, if it's a person or a portrait. It's something that I've learned the hard way. Over time, I made a million uh, pictures, maybe not a million, but thousands at least, in which I looked at it later, looked at it in the mirror, and I thought, wow, this is kind of cockeyed, or maybe I had to just simply crop the entire picture, crop out certain elements, thinking, when you write on it, you're thinking this is just working great. Later, you look at it, or even a week later, and you glance at it in a mirror, and you realize, nah, that's just not going to work. So anyway, I printed out basically a Busal, a brown and white type version of Chippy. And then in the viewer, this little Samsung, I'm able to zoom in to find elements that I think are going to be important, just the anatomy, so I can get more volume, think about the muscles under the surface, and how I can create that realistic volume. So that's part of my process too, is just using as many tools as possible for evaluation. And at this point, I've been solely using pastel pencils. As the picture evolves, I start using a little bit of new pastel, and I'll be using also a pastel stick. It might be Sennelier, Rembrandt, it could be a variety. Even I've used every kind of pastel in the world. Sometimes I find them at garage sales. Some will come from like countries like Russia or Austria. Just anything I find. Even those run-of-the-mill type pastels that you find at Hobby Lobby, I've got those. And I like all of them because you're going to find that there's a certain color. Hard pastel is great in the beginning of a picture because it doesn't drive a lot of the pigment into your paper. So that's why I do start off a lot of them here with the pastel pencils. These are Carbothello, Cretacolor is another one, and Derwent. So I use a variety. Anything works. It's all about, I think, color. I use Conti a lot, and I like Conti. They are a little more fragile, and to the left of the picture, you'll see a little sanding board that I have. And that's something I use a lot with my pastel pencils. It's a piece of 80 grit sanding belt paper, and I created a little pocket that catches the pastel. That way I'm able to sand the tip down to a nice fine point. I zoomed in a little bit there on old Chippy so you could see it real quick, but now we're back at just starting to rethink, what do we want now for foreground? How do we want that belly to come forward? And I'm going to start to think about more of my color contrast. So here I'm using a pan pastel, and the green that I'm using here is actually a bunch of old greens that I had, little chunks of this and that. I put it in a mortar and pestle, and I ground it up, and I put it in a little container. It gives me a really good green that I can just toss on the paper. Gives me a good start for a neutral sort of pea green, or kind of a bright olive or something. And I'm able to use that with my pan pastel tools to just really cover a lot of space that I want to be atmospheric. I focus on the negative space around Chippy, especially background, atmosphere, not trying to put any detail necessarily, just creating atmosphere that works with the colors. And you'll see in the end results how strong that works out. I'm going to give you a little post here at the end to show you what the final product looks like. But in this video, I just wanted to show you some of my process here. So pastel pencils, new pastel, pan pastel, and I'm going to start thinking more and more about the overall picture. What do I want to do with my foreground? And you can see here I'm sharpening my pastel pencil, or even new pastels, on that sanding grit paper that I have there. My favorite is 80 grit sanding melt that I just simply cut in half, and then I glue it to a board, and then I create a pocket underneath, and I'll partially sharpen a pastel pencil in an electric pencil sharpener, but not all the way, because you just don't want to break that tip. So you're just barely giving it a little bit of a tip, and then I'm using that sanding paper, and I'm just rotating the pastel pencil as I brush it down the edge of that sandpaper. And it's amazing how you can just sharpen that tip to a really nice point, and you don't have to stop and shave it with a razor blade, and you don't have to fiddle around with it, being stuck in a pencil sharpener. So that sanding paper is just a dream come true for sharpening up a tip. There's a little detail. You can see how I work into everything in sort of a scratchy way until I start to really build layers and layers, especially with an animal that has a lot of fur or hair. And so here's old Chippy starting to develop, and I'm going to show you how it turned out. This is Chippy after I'd pushed my colors. Sometimes I like to give it that nice border that's really happy. It really brings the picture together. I like putting that pastel border around it, sort of like giving it a little matte, and it just really accents my colors. It works just like a matte, where I'm using the colors of the chipmunk, and it really just gives me a little glow where I want the glow to be inside the picture. So I'm really always thinking about my colors, the harmony of colors, and then what I'm approaching for my final results as far as the impact that I want when you first look at it. So this is my pastel demonstration in Chippy, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you, and check out my Patreon site and my website, paulbirchak.com, and have a fun day, stay healthy, and creative is the best. Be creative. Have fun.